Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Caregiver Cup podcast. It's Kathy here. I'm excited to share this episode with you because I know you can relate as a caregiver. Have you ever felt like you were just going through the motions or you felt like you were an autopilot? Let me throw some things up on the screen. Maybe you feel boring, blah, isolated, and you just can't get out of it. You can't snap out of it. Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about that autopilot that feeling that you're just in this normalcy routine and you're in this funk and you can't get out of it. Well, when my spouse was in going through a stem cell transplant and he finally was able to they were able to reharvest his cells, which means they took them out, they went through whatever they needed to go through to go ahead and get them ready, and then they were put back into his body. uh, it was an exciting time for us, but it was also a time that we knew was going to be the longest stretch that we had to take. And the first day that they put them in, that was plus day one or day plus one. And then it was day plus two, day plus three. And we knew we had to go through that off site or away from home for 30 to 45 days, depending on how his body accepted and was going to respond to his stem cells. And so every day we would get up Monday through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We would get up because he had to go into the clinic. He had to go ahead and get his labs drawn to see where he was with white blood cell count, red blood cell count, platelets, all that kind of stuff. And he also had to have like the normal stuff checked, like his blood pressure and his pulse and his oxygen level, his temperature, all that kind of stuff had to be checked to make sure that his body wasn't rejecting them. So I would get up each morning. Usually the appointments were like at 7, between 7 and 8 o'clock. Get up in the morning, wake up, shower, have breakfast, pack our lunch for the clinic because we didn't know how long it was going to be. Could be an hour, it could be 4 hours. We never knew. And because his blood and his results would respond to that. I would always try to clean the room before I left because it had to be sanitized each and every day because he wasn't staying inpatient. He was doing all of this outpatient. So we had to be extra careful. There were days that I had to do the laundry before or after. There were days that I had to do grocery shopping. And then I would do my job, my work on the computer. He would take a nap in the afternoon because he was so exhausted. I would make dinner. I would FaceTime my mom. And at night, if we were lucky, we could find a movie to watch, or I would read and we'd go to bed. It was the same thing every day. And we were isolated in a beautiful housing facility, but he couldn't leave his room most of the time. And so we had to really watch. When I say most of the time, as his body was getting better, they could leave a little bit more room for him to go ahead and walk the halls by, I think, day 15 plus 15, that kind of thing. It was monotonous, and the monotony is so hard, and I know you can relate to this. It's boring, it's isolating, it's not exciting at all. After about a week, day plus 7, about a week, I found myself with low energy. I found myself eating unhealthy, and I would say, "Well, maybe I need some sugar. I'll go get a cookie." And with the house that we stayed at, people always dropped off things, and so there was always tempting food to eat. And then I found myself sleeping more because I was bored and there was nothing else to do. I felt like I was walking in like sludge and or thick mud, and I everything seemed so hard, and I wasn't doing lot of physical activity. And but you know what? I think that isolation does a lot to you, and routines and not having anything to look forward to does a lot to you. During the pandemic, especially, there were stats that showed that adults had medium to high levels of loneliness. Yeah, and I think we can relate that to caregiving very easily. If you're caregiving for a loved one that can't leave the house, or they're very ill, or I think you're taking care of an elderly parent, it gets to be the same thing over and over and over again. What I want to talk about today is loneliness is a feeling. It should be a red flag for you. It should be an alert that that there are more issues happening for you. When you get these feelings of loneliness, you have to think of it like, what's going on? What's going on? Just like someone feels anxiety or they get a panic attack, you want to take a step back then and figure out why they're feeling that way. I don't want you to ignore it. I want you to pay attention to it. You may be surprised to hear that I felt this way for a very long time before caregiving. And I have patterns of it. And my body, and I'll even say out loud to myself or think it, I feel lonely. I feel so sad and secluded. I did in Before I became a caregiver in 2018, way back in 2015, I did a year-long traveling stint with my corporate job. I managed a group of people that facilitated new hires coming into the company at their specific locations. And so I managed a group of, I think there was 28 people that we managed. And so it required me to travel to places to do training and getting them up to speed, looking at the facilities, making sure that everything was consistent across the board. I even did facilitation if we didn't have somebody. And so I traveled a lot. And people think, "Oh, yeah, you're traveling. Oh my gosh, it's great." And it can be, but when you're on a schedule and you fly in on a Sunday night and you leave right away on a Tuesday morning, there's not much to do. You fly in Sunday night, you get ready, and you're there Monday, and then you fly out right away on Tuesday morning, and sometimes they flew it out on Monday evenings. And being on an airplane is lonely. Sure, there's people around, but it's like lonely in my opinion. So let's break down some of the things that you may feel as a caregiver, because there's so much research that shows that happiness, or the feeling of being happy and seeking happiness, there's so much research around it. And so when we're feeling blah, we can feel lonely, but we're also feeling that lack of feeling happy, lack of feeling joy. And most of us are searching for happiness, and we're searching for happiness usually in the wrong places. There's been a study at Rutgers and the University of Toronto found that people are always pursuing happiness and chasing it, and we're looking from it from the outside in. And you often feel like you don't have enough time in the day, might be an example, or you have too much to do on your to-do list, or you're always making others happy, and so you're not feeling happy yourself. It makes me feel unhappy sometimes too, because I have very little time, or I did when I was a caregiver, had very little time, and I was always chasing the outside thing and saying things like, "Oh, I can't wait till I can be happy again." Or I look at social media and people would be on vacation, or they would be doing a home project or something, and you're like, "Oh." And when we see that external happiness, we sometimes look at ourselves and we don't feel happy. And sometimes that's a lie to ourselves, because nobody is completely happy, or a picture isn't going to make them look happy. So, what are you guilty of this? I want to ask you this. Do you say things like, "I'll be happy when," or "I'll f- get back to something when"? And we as caregivers may have that temporary pause, and we might put our overall joy and happiness on hold. And think about some things like I'll be happy when I lose weight. I'll be happy when I fall in love. I'll be happy when I land that dream job. I'll be happy when I can get back to school or finish school. I'll be happy when I find my apartment. Or for you as a caregiver, I'll be happy when my caregiving job is done or my loved one feels better or we get through this week. I'll be happier then. And is that really true? I gotta have something to drink. My throat's getting sore. And there's multiple problems with thinking like this. I'll be happy when, because it, it never really happens. It never really happens. And then all of a sudden, because you don't find that big goal or you don't have that in front of you, what happens? I'll be happier when I get a day off. You're right back at it after the day is done. Or I'll be happier when I can go ahead and get my hair done because I feel like it's a mess. And as a matter of fact, I'm getting my hair colored tonight. I'll be happier when my hair's colored. Will I truly be happy when my hair's colored? Anchoring your happiness on something that hasn't happened yet is really unhealthy. That means your happiness is something you have to earn. Your happiness is something that's outside of you, and that's not what happiness is truly about. Happiness is about what you always is that with I can't speak. What's within your control. And the good news is you don't have to wait for happiness. You can learn to be happy. You can learn to be happier. You can learn to find moments of joy in that. And I don't know if you can see it up on the top of my wall, and I don't think you can. I have up top of my wall, I have choose happiness up there. Let me see if I can get my camera to go up there. Yeah, it's backwards, but I have that up on my wall up there because happiness is something you can do. I love this. This is based on science. Happiness is a formula. It's 100%. If somebody's 100% happy, let's just talk about that. 50% of the happiness is your genetics. You are who you are. And so those bubbly people that are always positive and happy and pleasant and stuff, that's genetics. 50% of it is. Or you can get somebody like my grandpa. My grandpa was always like this grouchy, crabby old man, but deep inside he had a heart of gold. But you might be that 50% pessimist or quiet person or conservative person. But the good news is the other 50% is something you can control, you can learn, you can take action on, which is really cool because that's the piece where you can find the capacity to go ahead and be happy and shift that happiness. And I think that's a huge step. If you other people might say that they want to try to find happiness or pursue happiness or thrive for happiness, they can do that with 50% of what they have. So I love this analogy, and I kind of stole this analogy or borrowed it from Mel Robbins. And so I can't take all the credit, but it's really good. There are waves in the ocean, right? And that's one spectrum of happiness. The waves are coming and they're beautiful and they come and they go. And having fun in the waves requires you to jump into the waves. So 50% of the waves are happy. And you could sit back and enjoy the waves. But if you want to increase your happiness, go ahead and jump in and go ahead and be the first person in your group and you jump in. And that's how you can control your happiness. Better yet, get a boogie board and boogie board or, kick and have fun with the waves. Now, we can't control everything from a happiness perspective because let's say you go and you go to the beach and you are just sitting there and the waves are calm and the sunshine is there and there's no wind. Well, some people might find that total happiness and peace? Some people might say, "Oh, okay." But what can you do when the waves are calm? Can you go out then and just float and be happy? So that's a really cool analogy. So there are two types of happiness. And if you haven't heard these, happiness is I love these because happiness is just not a one size that fits all. And I know I'm going to probably butcher this word, but hedonic or hedonistic happiness is happiness of pleasure. It's the waves, it's the fun, it's you jumping in, it's you going to a wedding and after dinner, instead of just sitting there socializing at the table with family and friends, you say, I'm going to get up and dance. Who wants to join me? And you go out on the dance floor and you start dancing by yourself, and then others join you. You're influencing happiness and you're bringing yourself and trying to get yourself to 100% happiness. It truly is that. And it doesn't happen all the time, but you can go ahead and fun, or you're watching a movie and it just brings you total pleasure. You go to a concert and you can be happy. It's kind of just in the moment kind of happiness. And then there's one that's called endomonic happiness, which is the deeper, meaningful happiness. And let me read what it says. It says, You're a life well lived with happiness. You have a sense of life, of your life having meaning, of you're feeling fulfilled or thriving in your life right now. And it's important for you to understand that happiness has these two buckets, because I think what happens for us is we either think it's the jump in the water moment or none. And so, yeah, you have to find meaning. And I think this is where a lot of you as caregivers are at right now is you're realizing that your deeper, meaningful, fulfilling life right now is not happy. So you may have to rely on the waves to go ahead and provide that. Or you might have to go ahead and really reflect on where can I find meaning in what I'm doing and where can I do that? And I practice gratitude all the time, and I started that way back in 2017 when I first started caregiving, because I wanted to find and keep that deeper meaning and look for moments of joy in this season that I'm in. And that's one. Now, when my mom was alive, in a couple years ago, we looked at how could we find moments of joy in those everyday pieces. And I've shared my story about Sunday Fun Day before, but Sunday Fun Day was an opportunity for my mom and I not to get bored with the everyday routines that we had to do each and every week. I had to take her grocery shopping, do the bills. We had to go ahead and run errands. I would help her with her around the house where she needed it, but it was boring. It was starting to become routine and blah and autopilot-y. I know that's not a word. And so I said to her, I said, we have to figure out something. Why don't we call our Sundays Fun Day? And we come up with a list of things to do. And we pick one each and every week. And so we would go to festivals or church picnics, or we would go shopping one day. We would go do pottery one day. We found something fun to do each and every day. And we started taking pictures and we had lots of memories and that sort of thing. And it gave her something to look forward to. And I didn't dread driving to my mom's every Sunday, knowing that I had to go ahead and spend the day away from all of the other pressures that I had to do and other things that I had on my plate. So I can look back at it now and like going, yes, it was fun. So you have it's easier. You have periods of life where you're trying to heal, right? And you're trying to survive and just maintain your right now. And so it's not fun sometimes, and the happiness is not there sometimes for you. That's where you have to find your focus on yourself and look at this one. Look at the endemonic happiness and try to find ways to shift and improve your mindset, your actions, and that sort of thing. It's easier to say than done. I know it because think about it. If you're not happy in your job and you're working your job, well, you have a choice to quit your job, and that's the extreme side, and find something else. Well, you can't quit caregiving, but in your job, you can talk to your boss. You can go ahead and work with your team. You can find other solutions to go ahead and figure out what the cause of it is and make it better. And the same would go for caregiving with that as well. You want to go ahead and make the best of the situation. I couldn't leave Dennis at the stem cell transplant and the whole process that we were at. I had to look for ways to improve the process, and you have to take a serious look and make your shifts. And my suggestion is trying to make small shifts and see if you feel lighter. You see if you find moments of happiness. Like when we were at the Frederick Hospital in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and in the housing that we stayed at, I went shopping one day. I just had to get away. I found a time that it was safe to go. I masked up, I sanitized up, and I just walked around Kohl's. I FaceTimed my moms. We called our kids on weekends. Finally, by I think plus 21, Mark, our oldest son, came and visited. And so, but for you, it could be, could you have coffee with a friend? Could you volunteer? Could you find that yoga class? Or better yet, I have a client, Lisa, that she used to go dancing with her loved one. And she would go dancing all the time with her spouse. Now her spouse can't go. And so she missed it so much, and that brought in some happiness for her. Well, last week she messaged me, and I was just bawling on my phone when I was looking at it. She said she finally got the courage to go by herself. She said she cried. She laughed. And when she came back home, she was so proud of herself. She felt that little bit of pleasure and happiness. So you have to figure out what that would be. And another thing is find a community, friends, family, other caregivers that you can go ahead and feel happy with, because not only are you going ahead and trying to make those small shifts, you have to break this habit of being isolated and feeling lonely, because what happens if you do feel lonely and isolated, it leads into other problems for you. And so you have to find that courage and take those baby steps to go ahead and do that. Let me talk about the beach again. When you go to the beach, like I said, some days it's very, very calm day and there are no waves, and the skies might even be cloudy a bit. Boy, it sure is beautiful, but it also can be still and can be stale. And i- and if it's like that every single day, you might find a way that you got to figure out a way. Instead, you look at those quiet days like us, and when they're quiet, things aren't happening for the worse for your loved one, and things are routine. You have to figure out how you can look at that cup half full and celebrate the fact that you are in a good state right now, and you have control over now things that can change a little bit. There's been many times in my life, in my caregiving life, where Dennis was in that +7, +8, +9, +10, +30, +31, that kind of thing, where he wasn't as sick and things were going okay. So instead of being bored or feeling blah, you have to look at it as an opportunity now. What can I do to go ahead and make the best of the situation that I am in? I love this statement here. It really, when you think about true happiness, it comes from finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. And what can you find in those autopilot days that can boost your mood, that can boost your energy? And I think there's a lot to be said about finding relationships. I'm going to share one with you. When I was in Freighter, or when we were in the housing place, after about, oh, maybe after we were there about a week, I would always have to clean the room, and so I would have to go into the janitor closet, which was a community closet, and it didn't look like a janitor closet, and get, like, the Swiffer jet floor cleaners and, uh, sanitizer and toilet bowl cleaner, all that kinda stuff, and I met John, who was the one of the cleaning people there, and I started forming this relationship with John, and it was so fun because each and every day I would go, "Hi, John, how are you doing?" A we started talking. I got to know who he was, his family. We got to talk sports and news and all of that fun stuff. But I reached out and I found something and I looked forward to him. And when he wasn't there on the weekends, it was a bummer because I missed John and I couldn't wait for to find out what he did on Monday and how was his weekend and all that kind of stuff. Well, for you too, what can you do, especially when the waves are calm and you're floating in the ocean and it's beautiful and it's calm, but you get to the point where it's like, okay, this is great, but I need something else. What can you do? And if you're in a situation, maybe it's finding a recipe and cooking a recipe, or it's finding other caregivers and jumping on Zoom. That's why I started the Caregiver Cup Circle. What can you do to, and I know it's not a word, but spurt or find spurts in your happiness and find moments of joy. I have another client that used to volunteer all the time. She was on the board of directors and she was part of the administration of this renowned nonprofit organization. When her husband got sick, she couldn't do it anymore. And she missed the whole volunteering aspect of it. And she made the decision she couldn't be involved in a lot of the deep stuff like the board and the administration stuff and the officer stuff. So instead, she just found small moments of volunteerism and she did it once a week and it filled her bucket of happiness so that she felt like she had a purpose. We all need to find that important piece, and that's our inner peace, our contentment when it comes to happiness and those things that light us up. And it doesn't have to be that in depth. It could be going for a walk, it could be playing in your garden, it could be going for lunch with a friend once a month, it could be enjoying a concert like I did with my sister. I want you to really think about that because you want to be able to find those moments of happiness, and nobody can make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. Remember, you're 50% of who you are when it comes to happiness, and the other happiness has to be filled up with you. And you have to find that. Sure, people can come in and lift your spirits, but then they're going to leave. So, what can you do to sustain your happiness? And so, I want to end today by saying a couple of things is when you fill your cup with some form of happiness or some form of self care, it's not selfish. You can't be the best caregiver until you know what you need and choose what you need. Because when you're filling this cup up, you have to continue to fill that cup up. And when it goes dry, that's when you start feeling more emotions and physical and emotional situations come back up. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Caregiver Cup podcast and on this YouTube channel, because I think that it's so important for us as caregivers to constantly be reminded that we can shift, we can change. It might be the hardest season that we're in, so our shift may be just this little, but a little tiny shift in something, having a friend come over while you're doing dishes and just chatting with you, that may be what you need tonight, whatever it would be. As always, I know caregiving is hard. I know it's hard, and I'm here to support you. I have my podcast episodes out and any podcast site that you listen to. I have my YouTube channel. You can go out to my website at kathylvan.com or search Caregiver Cup and you'll find it. And as always, if you like what you've heard, please share this with another caregiver, because we want to help as many caregivers as we can through this journey. And we want to band together. We're here to help each other. You have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk to you next Tuesday or next week. Bye for now.